Hello, welcome to the Salesforce DX Keynote. I'm really pleased, thank you, really pleased today to talk to you about continuous development on the Lightning platform. My name is Wade Wegner, and it's an honor to be your host today as we talk about a bunch of exciting new things that we're bringing to all of you developers on the Salesforce Lightning platform. Now, it would not be a Salesforce keynote if we did not have our forward-looking statement. Now, in this session today, we're going to talk about a lot of new things coming, in particular this summer. And so I want to remind everyone to please make all of your purchasing decisions based on the amazing products that we already have available in market today. Now, with that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing with Salesforce DX. This has been a journey that we've been on for many years now, and it's been awesome to have all of you with us as a part of it. Now, there are three things that I really want to remind everyone with respect to Salesforce DX. The first is that we want to enable all of you to be able to use the tools that you love. Now, we spend a lot of time building awesome tools like the extension for Visual Studio Code and the Salesforce CLI. But the point is, you should be able to use the tools you're familiar with and the tools that you want to develop with, whether it's IntelliJ or Eclipse or Vim. You should have that choice and be empowered to do that. We also are spending a lot of time enabling you to be able to continuously develop together. And so whether you're building apps with clicks or you're writing code, you can build apps that you can then test against to make sure that you can release with confidence, as well as take advantage of powerful tools like change sets, as well as packaging in order to distribute these apps on the platform. And then, of course, kind of central to everything with Salesforce DX is to enable you as teams to be able to release together and to be able to manage these releases using tools of your choice, as well as tools that we make available to you on the platform. And so one thing that I really want to highlight and call out is that Salesforce DX is not just about fancy command line interfaces or tools and code. It's about empowering all of you to be able to build on the platform. Salesforce DX is the Salesforce developer experience, and everyone in this room is a developer, and these tools are for you, whether you're, again, building apps using the Lightning App Builder, if you're writing Apex code, or you're building services that are operating and running on Heroku. Salesforce DX is here to empower you to do more. Now, I want to take a moment to actually talk a little bit about release management and kind of break down this slide and talk about the things that are enabling you to be able to release together as teams. Now, I would venture to bet that almost everyone in this room has used change sets and sandboxes to take a set of changes that you've made in an environment and to collect them together as a change set and then deploy them into another environment. And that is a very powerful way with which you can leverage sandboxes and different environments to release your applications. And we empower you to do this using the change set UI, as well as the metadata API that is powered either by the Ant or the command line interface that we have for Salesforce. Now, we've also augmented this distribution capability and this distribution set of tools by introducing packaging recently. And so packaging allows you to take the app that you're building and describe it as a unit and to deploy it as a unit as well, so that it's not just about the set of changes that you're making and deploying from one environment to another. It's about treating that application as a unit and deploying it into all your environments. And I think the key thing I want everyone to take away from this slide is that it's not an either-or proposition here. We feel that with change sets as well as with packaging, you get the tools that you need to be able to do the development that your team is expected to do to deliver to your customers. Now, today we're going to talk through three primary themes. We're going to talk about adoption of Salesforce DX, and we're going to highlight some of the successes that we've seen, but we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you've also told us you're facing and what we're doing to make this a little bit easier. We're going to talk about developer productivity tools, and in particular, how we can enable you to do more with the command line interface, as well as get more insight into what your code is doing when you're building and writing your applications. And then, of course, pulling this all together, we're going to talk about how you can develop continuously and use continuous delivery as a part of your capabilities. So I am thrilled to be joined by some amazing people here today, and you're going to get to hear all of them as we go through these demos and talk about these capabilities. And so I'm thrilled that Karen Fidelik, Nahid Samsami, Andy Fawcett are going to be here talking about some of the stuff they're working on. And of course, driving the Jeep and driving the demos, we've got Dave Carroll and Nate Totten as well. So let's talk a little bit about adoption. Now, as I mentioned, we've been on this journey with Salesforce DX for a while. And I wanted to highlight a couple of things that I think are pretty exciting and pretty impressive. The first is that since we have GA'd this product, we have seen you all create over 250,000 scratch orgs. Now, there's two things that I think is really interesting and exciting about this number. The first is that it really shows that you are embracing these types of environments, this type of ephemeral environment, to not only develop the apps that you're building, but integrate it into your continuous integration and your testing strategies. The second thing that I think is really exciting about this number is we've also deleted over 250,000 scratch orgs as well. And so our infrastructure teams absolutely love this aspect of it. The next thing I want to call out is the number of tests that we have seen you use as part of this flow. This really reinforces to us that you are embracing this in a big way as part of your automation systems and making sure that you can use these environments to release with confidence, running tests against the apps that you're building and the changes that you're making. And then last, and while this number is a different scale, I want to highlight that packaging for customers is a very new concept. This is a new technology that we've introduced, and it is really exciting to see customers embracing packaging as a way to take the apps that you're building and actually install them into your environments. So really what this tells us is that the tools and these capabilities, they've resonated, and you're starting to use them. Now, as I mentioned, though, we've seen some challenges in adoption, and we want to talk a little bit about those and some of the things that we're working on in order to make this easier for all of you. And so for that, I would like to invite Karen Fidelic, our Director of PM for Lightning Platform, to come on stage and tell us what we're doing.
Great. So thanks, Wade. So as Wade's just reviewed, with Salesforce DX, we've worked really hard to build tools and methodologies to make your development experience better. But ultimately, that development experience is only as good as the level of support that we have for metadata in our platform. As you may know, metadata is what allows you to build customized applications on our platform. And key to a good developer experience is automation. Being able to automate your flows, your development, and your ALM flows from source control through continuous integration and delivery, all the way through the whole release management process. And the bridge between the metadata in your applications and these automated flows is what we're calling our metadata exposure channels. And these are the tools and applications and APIs that allow you to move metadata between environments in an automated way. And so these tools are things like our metadata API and source tracking in Salesforce DX, where you can do source push and pull, packaging, like Wade just mentioned, change sets. These are the ways that you can automate your flows and move metadata across different environments. And when we have cases where metadata is not supported in any of these channels, we have gaps, and that breaks the automation. So unfortunately, I would imagine that some of you, maybe many of you in this audience, have encountered these kinds of gaps that we have and have had to manually intervene with your development and make manual modifications directly in your org because you weren't able to automate that through our flows. And given that automation is key, we understand that this is not acceptable, and we're placing a high priority on making sure that we've got all those gaps covered and filled, and that we have full support for metadata across all of our system. And so with that, we're placing a high priority on an initiative to make sure that we've got this full coverage. So the first step of doing that is to ensure that we have proper documentation and that we understand what our coverage actually is and can properly communicate that. And so the first thing we're going to do is talk about documentation and look at our current documentation that we have. So with that, we're going to switch over here, do a quick little exploration of our metadata documentation. So some of you have probably seen this. We'll start with our metadata API guide that we have. This is where we list all of our metadata that's supported in our metadata API. We also have pages that list the metadata that's supported through our other channels, like packaging and source tracking and our tooling API, and we have multiple pages that go through that level of support. We also even have a page that lists unsupported metadata in our system. And the point of this is really just to illustrate that today, our documentation for metadata is pretty disparate, It's not consistent. It's not necessarily easy to find or navigate. And furthermore, on our side, it's hard to keep accurate and updated because it's a manual process for us to maintain this information. And so with that, we recognize that we want to make this whole process better and deliver you better information. And so I'm pleased to announce today and share with you a new metadata coverage report, which we've been working on and which we'll be releasing in the summer 18 release. And so what you're seeing here is a new report. And what you might first note is that we've got a list of all the metadata that we support, all of our metadata types down the left-hand side. Across the top, we've got columns for each of our metadata channels. We've been focusing on the core Salesforce DX channels, the metadata API, source tracking, source push and pull, and unlocked packaging. We will be adding additional channels to this list in a subsequent release. But the first thing you can note right off the bat is that now we've got a consolidated view of all this information in one place. So this is a definite improvement over what we've got today, where we've got this kind of, as we just saw, scattered. The second thing that you'll note is that we've got these pretty green check marks indicating where we have metadata supported in a given channel. We have a dash that indicates where we don't yet have support for a given metadata type in a channel. And that's useful information, but what's really exciting and really the most important part of this report right now is how we're getting that information and what's happening underneath the hood. So this report is being automatically generated in real time. When we open this, it's actually pulling the data directly from our platform. And so that's really exciting. That's really important because it means that you can be assured that the information that you're seeing is accurate and reflective of the environment that you're working in. So we think this is a huge step forward for us. That said, information is great, but what our real goal is to make sure that we have complete coverage. So going back to the whole idea of automation, we want to be able to automate your entire development process. And so our goal is, in fact, to make sure that we have green check marks across this whole table here. And one of the features that we're looking to add to this report is to allow you to select any of these gaps that you can see and essentially vote them up and help communicate back to us what the most important gaps are for you. And that will help us in our prioritization process as we work through closing these gaps. So we are placing a high priority on closing the gaps and also ensuring that moving forward, all new metadata that we develop internally is supported through all of these channels just out of the gate. So with that, full coverage for metadata is important, but we also recognize that it's not necessarily enough. And so one of the things that we continually hear as a challenge as you're getting going with Salesforce DX is an understanding and figuring out how to break up your org into more manageable pieces in order to take advantage of the modularity and packaging capabilities that DX offers. And so with that, I'm pleased to announce and share with you today our new Dependency API that we're introducing as a pilot in summer 18. And what this API is going to allow you to do is run simple queries that will return the metadata relationships within your org or your application. And so this will allow you to really explore the relationships and get a better understanding. Yay! So let's take a look at what just ran here. We've got Dave running a demo back here, and what we did was we just ran a query. It's a simple SOQL query, and we're querying against a new object that we've created called a metadata component dependency object. And this is a lot of information that's being spit out here, but let's take a look at what we've actually got. So if we can scroll back up to the top, and we can see what we're actually looking at. So we've got the first column here is all of the metadata components that are in our org. We're running this against the Dreamhouse app. Okay, so we've got all the components in that Dreamhouse app. We've got a list then of what the types of those components are. And then we've got a list of all the referenced components, the components that are referenced by that first column. So if we just take a moment and sort of reflect on this, this is an incredible amount of information that we have not historically had easy access to. And this is really the key information that's going to help us understand the structure of the org, slice and dice it, and get that understanding that we haven't had. You can almost think about this as the keys to the black box that has been our metadata and the metadata dependencies. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little bit of exploration and look at a few use cases of how we might be able to use this data to be able to better answer the questions and challenges that we've had, okay, as you've been working through this adoption process. So we're going to start with this property controller Apex class. We're just going to take one of these components here. And we're going to run another query. And with this time, we're going to run the same query, but we're going to filter on the property controller component here. Okay, and when we do this, what you'll see is now we've got a list of the property controller component and all of the referenced components, the components that are referenced by that property controller Apex class. So you can start to get an idea the power of this, right? So now I've got sort of a set of metadata that I could encapsulate and I could package up and install into an org through an unlocked package, let's say. And I could continue on, and you could imagine how you could do queries like this to really understand the structure across your whole org. So now let's take a look at another use case that we might want to take advantage of here. So you can see that this property controller component references a bunch of custom fields. And let's say that you've made a modification to one of your custom fields. We're going to pick broker here as a custom field that we're going to look at. And you've made this change in your org, and you're wondering what the impact of that change is across your whole application or your whole org. So in other words, the question that you're trying to answer is, what are all the components that reference this broker custom field? And it just so happens that this is one of the most popular questions that we have on Idea Exchange right now. There's something like 34,000 votes on this particular question. And what we can do now with this API is we can answer that question. So we're going to run this query again. And this time we're going to filter, we're kind of going to flip the query. We're going to filter it on the referenced component, in this case being that custom field broker. And when we do that, we can now see a list of all of the components that reference broker, that custom field. Okay? Woo! So again, you can really kind of understand and get a sense of the power of this data and what you can do with it and how you can slice and dice and get a better understanding. That said, you may be looking at this information and saying, well, this is all well and good. This is really great information, but it's a lot of words and it's a bunch of lists. And what I'd really like is to be able to visualize this, maybe graphically. And so we're in luck. It just so happens that Andy Fawcett has created a plugin that lets us do just that. And so we've got this plugin that we're going to run here. And what it's doing is it's outputting a dot file, which is a text-based representation of the structure of our metadata here that can be then read in to a graphical visualization tool. So we're going to generate that dot file for that broker custom field, that node of the hierarchy. We're going to look at this in VS Code, and you can see, again, it's just a simple text-based file that illustrates through words the hierarchy of that node. But what's more interesting is now we can open that in a graphical visualization tool, GraphViz in this case, and see a really nice picture of that hierarchy, right? And so you can see here that broker custom field is being referenced by all of the components that are listed there as illustrated through the arrows. Woo. Thank you, Andy. So with that, in summary, I hope that I've teased you a little bit and given you some ideas, gotten you excited, and maybe encouraged about some of the tools and capabilities that we're now introducing that should help you move forward with that whole process of adoption on DX. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Wade.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So just a quick summary, that metadata report is fantastic. I think all of us as developers know how vital good documentation is, and we have a lot of it. difference here being that this is dynamically generated data based on your org. So very excited to see this metadata report come to life and for you to be able to use it. And that dependency API, I think we really illustrated some neat use cases, but I think what excites us most is what you will all do with this dependency API. The fact that you'll be able to explore the metadata in these relationships. It'll just be exciting to see the tools and capabilities that you empower and drive with that. And so we're going to pivot now and move from adoption and start talking a little bit about developer productivity. And in particular, as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about two key areas. One is, how can you customize your automation a little bit more with the command line interface, as well as how can you get insights into what your applications are doing when that code is running. And so to start this off, I would like to invite Nahid Samsami, our product manager at Heroku, to come talk about the command line interface.
Thanks so much, Wade. I'm here to talk about how you can gain superpowers as a developer with our Salesforce command line interface. Now, what I love about command line interfaces or CLIs is not just that they're fast and easy to use as a developer, but you can really use them to automate your processes, to write scripts, and to streamline your workflows. Now, what if I told you that you could extend the Salesforce command line interface? That if there's a command that's not in there right now, that you'd be able to write code and add it yourselves without waiting for us to do anything. Well, now you can. I'm super excited to announce support for custom plugins that you can build to extend the Salesforce CLI, and along with that, the DX core libraries. So this is really exciting because the DX core libraries are going to make building those custom plugins just so much easier. You can think of the DX core libraries as kind of like an SDK around all the functionality of DX, so that you can really easily connect to the DX APIs to build your custom plugins. As an example, how many times have you all struggled with writing authentication code? I know I have. With this, you won't need to keep writing that again and again. It takes care of it for you out of the box. It's pretty awesome. So today, what I'm going to do right here live on stage is we're going to build a custom plugin, and Dave, over in that Jeep over there, is going to write the code, and we're going to see it all work. All right, ready, Dave? Yes. Cool. OK, so first we're going to run the SFDX commands, and you can see these are. Actually, let's just run SFDX. Yes. OK, so you can see that these are the topics that you have available to you right now. You have force, you have plugins, and you have update. We have a new command. It's SFDX plugins create. You can run this when you go home and create your own plugin. And we're going to create a new plugin, and we're going to call it new plugin. There it is. It's creating. And it's going to ask for a bunch of information that's going to be important when you register your plugin, but for now, we're just going to go with the defaults. So as it's building, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening behind the hood. So it's creating a scaffold. It's creating a folder of code, and it's going to have a sample command in it. It's kind of like a hello world command, but it has an SFDX flavor. And that sample command is going to take two pieces of information. It's going to take your username, and it's going to take your DevHub username. It's going to then connect to the APIs using the DX core library. It's going to query the Scratch org, and it's going to output in the CLI some information about your org. OK, it looks like it's ready. So let's run that sample command. There we go. So there Dave's put in the hello org command. He's put in his username, which is Depapi. He's put in his DevHub name, which is huborg. And you can see that he got the output. Wait. Uh-oh. Let's run that again, Dave. OK, so he's just linking the plugin so that it runs. So there's a step where instead of running it locally, you link the plugin to make it run in your command line with that command. It wouldn't be a live demo if something didn't go slightly wrong. Now you know that it's really happening live. OK, so now we're linking the dependencies. think we're ready. Okay, let's go and look in the code while that happens. So I'm going to dig into the code now. So this is the code that's behind what's happening. And I'm going to focus on the source folder. So the source folder has commands in it. And let's look at the code behind the commands. You'll see that there's that hello topic there that we just looked at, and there's an or command underneath that topic. And let's look at the code for the or command. OK, so what's really important to note here is that the DX core libraries are already injected here. And so you have an authenticated connection. And let's look at that code where that authenticated connection is happening. We're going to highlight it. Yes. And then we're using that authenticated connection to query the Scratch org and to get a result. And then we can use we can then output that result in the SFDX CLI, and there's libraries to do that as well. You can see on line 69 there's the UX log. And the great thing about using our core plugins, it's about you building a custom plugin, is that the output will look exactly like the output for the rest of the SFDX CLI. So all the formatting that you know and love is going to automatically happen. And now let's go back, and I want to show you one more thing, which hopefully will work. If we go back to the command line, I want to show you what happens if we add a --JSON so that we can see the output in JSON. Well, I'll tell you what will happen is that you'll get you'll get the output in JSON format, and it'll be formatted just like the rest of the output is that you already see. So say if you have a script that you've already written or some processes that you've already automated, and you're used to those two types of output that you get in a JSON with the existing commands, when you add a command using a custom plugin that you've written, the output in JSON will look exactly the same. So there's no extra step required to make the new commands that you're building fit in with your existing processes. It just works out of the box. So that's just super cool. All right, so let's recap what we have seen. We've talked about building a custom plugin. We've talked about how it connects to the DX core libraries. And we've talked about how you can go home and do this, and you can build your own custom plugins to extend the CLI. So now I'd like to take a step back and talk a little bit about something that we've shared with the community, the broader community, which is OCLIF, the Open CLI Framework. This is a framework for building CLIs. It's actually the framework that Salesforce CLI and the Heroku CLI are built upon. And it's an open source project, and we shared it with the community just last week. And we've gotten a really great response so far. It was trending on GitHub all of last week. I think it was #1 in TypeScript, and #3 across all the repositories. And if you want to build a command line for your company or a personal command line, what's really cool about this is a lot of the work is done for you. So things like auto documentation, all the flag passing, testing helpers, that's all in this open source project. So you can go learn more at oclif.io, and we'd love to see you building command lines. And so just to wrap up, command line interfaces are all about making you more productive and giving you superpowers. And so I hope you have a great experience building these custom plugins. And I'll hand it back over to Wade.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So to summarize, we're really excited about the ability for you to all create your own plugins. I think in particular, this DX core library is going to make it really easy. I mean, as Nahid mentioned, we have so many flavors of OAuth. Who wants to continually write yet another variant of how to do authentication? And so using these core libraries, you won't have to. And then, of course, OCLIF is really, really cool. In fact, the plugin that you saw run earlier to generate that metadata graph that Andy had created is built using this OCLIF framework. So it's a lot of fun to use and very, very powerful. So as I mentioned, we're going to shift a little bit now, still talking about developer productivity. And instead, now what we're going to do is look at some of the different ways that we're going to help you get more insight into the code that you've written and the code that you have running. And to do that, I'm thrilled to introduce Andy Fawcett, who, as a Salesforce employee now, is going to talk to you all about what it is that we're doing. Andy.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you, everyone. OK. So I'm really pleased to show to you all 2 new productivity features for admins and developers. And to help me do that, I've got Nate in the demo vehicle, and he's going to be taking on the role for this demo of an administrator that's just started at a new organization. And as part of that, he wants to discover how the objects are used as you're navigating around the application. So he's decided to use the new DX CLI command called tail. Now, the DX CLI command called tail actually allows you to debug and dump the debug logs to the console in a streaming fashion. So as you can see, he's navigating around the application, and it's constantly streaming those debug logs. He's not having to go into the console, click it, open it, search within the console. Great. Really cool. There's more. So there's some color coding in there as well. The color coding helps you pinpoint things in those graphs, and you can customize that color coding as well if you want. But let's try piping the output of tail into grep, because after all, he's interested in the queries. So let's run that again, and as he's navigating through, this time we're seeing a much reduced amount of information, just the queries themselves. So he's doing well. He's an administrator. It's day 1. He's already much more aware of the applications and the objects that are being accessed in that org. Great stuff. OK, let's switch track over to VS Code. Now Nate is involved in the Dreamhouse application, and it's been reported to him that there's a bug in the bot message functionality. It's not quite returning a message that he was expecting. So once again, he's going to break out the tail command, and he's filtering this time on user debug, because he happens to know he's put some debug telemetry in his code that will help him pinpoint the problem. So on the left-hand side of this split terminal, he's running the run test command. On the right-hand side, we see the debug information. So he's starting to get a better feel for how he can find a bit more about the root cause of this problem. But he needs a little bit more of an interactive process. So he decides to break out the Apex Replay Debugger. OK, so this is a feature that we're announcing for summer. It'll be in pilot. And it'll essentially allow you to take a debug log that you've generated yourself or somebody has passed on to you, a customer or a colleague, and replay interactively the steps that are executed in that debug log. So Nate's got a bit of an interest in terms of this particular breakpoint that he sets, and we can see he's already got the debug log open. He presses play, and this is the standard debug user experience in VS Code that he's using here. So if you're familiar with that, you're immediately familiar with Apex Replay Debugger. And of course, as you'd expect, as you're stepping through this, you can see all the variables changing in the context according to where he is in his current moment of execution. So Nate's getting a little closer to the cause of the problems, decides to set another breakpoint, and moves forwards, fast forwards through that debug log to the bot message, steps over that line, and sure enough, something doesn't look quite right. That message is not what he was expecting. So he's going to use another productivity feature to go straight into that class. He didn't have to go searching for it. He found it directly by going go to definition. And yeah, it looks like Nate's found the problem. How about that? He's debugged the issue, used the debug tail, found the problem. Now he's going to push that back up to his Scratch org. This is a Scratch org just for his purposes. He needs to be comfortable that it's resolved the issue. So before we close this part of the demo, we're going to highlight one more usability feature we've embedded in VS Code. See those little run all test and run test features? He's just going to run a test directly from within the editor. He doesn't need to go to the command line, figure out what to do. He runs it directly from the editor. This keeps your experience inside the editor, particularly if you're fond of developer test-driven development, running those tests iteratively. So to summarize, we've shown 2 features here, the Apex debug log tail command, suitable for both developers and administrators interested in monitoring what's going in the org, and also the Apex Replay Debugger. And did I mention it's free? Anybody can use it? It's available. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll pass back to Wade.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, we're very excited about those 2 new capabilities. And I know even personally, working on some Trailhead modules and apps for the Trailhead modules, I have availed myself of the new streaming logs with the tail command in the CLI. So very excited for all of you to use that. And that command is already available in the CLI. And then, as Andy mentioned, the Replay Debugger will be available this summer. And so what we're going to do now is pivot from developer productivity and talk again about release management, and in particular, how we can enable you all to do continuous delivery and to develop in a continuous fashion. And this really gets to the heart of what it is that we've been trying to do with Salesforce DX. And today, you can do this with a lot of great and powerful tools. In fact, we have a lot of partners like Capado and AutoRabbit and Flowsome and Gearset who are building really powerful release management capabilities in the platform. And we know many of you are rolling your own using Jenkins or TeamCity or Travis CI. And so what we wanted to do is actually enable all of you to do the same thing, but using what we happen to think is one of the industry-leading release management tools, and that is Heroku Pipelines and Heroku CI. And so I'd like to invite Andy Fawcett back up on stage to show us how we can do release management using Heroku Pipelines.
Thank you, Wade. Keeping me busy today. OK, so I'm ably supported by Nate. And in this demonstration, Nate is a developer of an application called Gifter. Gifter has been in production for 4 or 5 months now and has been in use and got some positive feedback. But one of the bits of feedback he has received I'd like to address is that when the images that are displayed come up, they're a little bit tiny. We can't really appreciate the lovely pictures of the cats in all their glory in that size image. So Gifter will allow us to insert those images into our chatter post. That's the functionality of this application. So what we're going to see now is how Nate responds to that bit of feedback. Of course, he's going to go into the code and make the change. And because Nate is obviously under demo situation here, we're going to assume that ordinarily he would have done due diligence on this and run his tests and checked it all in his own personal Scratch org. But he's going to go ahead now and push this up to source control. So for this, he's using a tool called GitHub Desktop. It's a graphical interface onto Git. If you're not familiar with the CLI, it's a great way of getting into source control. So he's pushed that change up. The next thing he needs to do, because that change is in a special branch that's just for his particular change, he needs to notify the pipeline system that there is a change that he'd like to merge into the main develop branch so that it becomes part of the product officially. So he's now using the GitHub UI, and that pull request is being created directly from within the GitHub desktop application. So now that we've created that pull request, we can now take a look at the pipeline. So what the pipeline is showing us is a visual representation of essentially your life cycle of this change. The first step is something what we call a preview application. Now, of course, we're all familiar with the best practice of code reviewing that pull request with other developers and architects. But with a preview application, we can go beyond that. We can show it to other people in an isolated preview environment to get further confidence about the change that's been made. So using the power of DX CLI and the Heroku pipeline, you can see the logs that are coming up here are confirming that we've pushed that code automatically into a Scratch org. This is a genuine Scratch org created just for the purpose of this preview app. Now that that's been created, from the actual Heroku pipeline, we'll be able to open that preview app and take a look at that. So let's have a look, see if all those cat images are looking brighter than life. There they are. Wonderful. OK. Right, so we must remember we're in a session and we can't spend the day looking at cat gifs. So let's move on. What happens next? Well, we're embracing unlock packages with this demonstration. So the next thing that happens is we want to create a new version of that. And Nate has already realized that the pipeline can help him with this process. So once the release manager confirms that this branch is valid, everybody's had a look at it, the code reviews are passed, he merges this. And that triggers another piece of automation in the pipeline. The pipeline is now going ahead and creating a new version of that package. Remember, these are unlocked packages, similar in concept to AppExchange packages that you might download and install, but these are your packages. That new version is now being created, and by reviewing the logs, we can get confirmation, yep, our new package has been created. We can also take a look at the tests that have been executed as part of that. We'll get confidence that not only now that it looks good, the code's good, but also, crucially, the automated tests for this pass as well. So we're getting great visibility of the process. So the next step for this package is to take it through into your staging org. This is an extended environment where, of course, other people can experience the change in terms of integrations that are available in the staging org, as well as the change itself. So instead of pushing that change in a raw form into your staging org, we're going to install the package. And that process is as much as you would expect from an App Exchange installation, except, of course, it's automated with DX. So the logs that we'll end up seeing here are going to show us the automation of the package installation when we promote that through to the staging environment. Once we've promoted it through into the staging environment, we can invite other people to take a look at the application in situ in your staging org, in your sandbox. Once everybody's happy with that, then the process of simply taking it from your staging environment, your sandbox, into production is just to take that same package that we generated, the same version, and install that into your production environment. So what we've seen here is essentially an end-to-end demonstration of discovering a change that needs to be made, the change being made at a local workstation, validated, pushed up into source control, and automation of the life cycle of that change, flowing through a preview environment, into staging, and into production, albeit self-contained in a single package. So with that, I'll hand back to Wade, and hope you enjoy pipelines.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So what I want to highlight again is Heroku Pipelines provides a fantastic way for your entire team to work together, continuously delivering your applications to your end users. And I do want to go back and emphasize, though, the kind of core tenet with Salesforce DX, and that is not to be overly prescriptive about the tools that you use. Yes, you can use Heroku Pipelines, and we think it'll be a great experience. But as I mentioned before, we have a lot of partners that are also building very powerful release management tools that work really well with Salesforce DX and building apps on the platform. So it would not be a developer-related keynote if we didn't talk a little bit about what's coming. So I'm not going to go through this entire list. Feel free to take pictures, read on it, and so forth. I want to call out a few things, though, that because, again, this is a developer audience, I think that you're going to care about. If you look at Summer 18 down at the bottom, we have a pretty exciting new permission that we are bringing. And this is something really related to release management. And that is giving you all the ability to have modified metadata permissions without having access to all the data. And this is something we have heard for a long time. This has been on the ID Exchange for a long time. And you can now use this to actually drive release management processes with developers without essentially giving them the keys to the kingdom. So very excited about that. And of course, you saw the Apex Replay Debugger. This will be available for you to use as part of an open beta this summer, and it'll be going to GA in winter. Now, I want to call your attention to a few sessions here that you really should take advantage of going to and listening. And the thing that is exciting about this Trailhead DX is that unlike last Trailhead DX, when you just heard from a lot of us Salesforce PMs and engineers, we've got a lot of you talking here at Trailhead DX as well. So our customers, our partners, SIs, et cetera. And so I encourage you to go to their sessions and hear their stories about how they're building on the platform with Salesforce DX. The panel that will take place later today at 2 o'clock in particular will be fantastic. And if you want to banish all the bugs, you've got to check out Nick Chen later today at 3 p.m. Now, you may be wondering how you can learn to use some of these things yourself today. And so we've got a fantastic trail that you can go through and get not only all of these badges, but a lot of knowledge about how you can perform these things, how you can do release management, continuous integration. And I'd like to call out 2 brand new packages that we've released here at Trailhead DX. The unlocked packages for customers and the unlocked packages quick start. So in particular, if you want to try out Gifter, the GIF to Chatter app you never knew you needed, take a look at that quick start for unlocked packages. And so with that, thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for building apps on our platform. Hope you have a great Trailhead DX.